Dog face. Even lightning. Hmm. All right. So we'll let some other folks tune in. And all right. TikTok dance. I got to do the point at stuff as it pops up on the screen. Should have kind of confused here. Let's see. Accept. There we go.
What's up, buddy?
How are you, sir?
Good. Good. Can you hear me?
I can.
Let me turn this up.
Doing dog face filter for tonight. By request.
How was your day?
Pretty good. Yeah, nothing out of the ordinary. I think I'm going to do that one. That one or the snow. You make it through the day in one piece.
Yeah, I literally just got off like 10 minutes ago.
We're gonna go right into it with your keep the momentum going.
Yeah.
We have some people coming on now. So if you guys didn't see in our social media posts, we're going to be doing lab work related questions. So anything related to lab work. If you haven't done these before, there is a little question icon down in the right hand corner. You can click on that, and that'll allow you to add. It's in the right or the left, but that'll allow you to add questions, or you can just put them in the regular little comment bar. Either way, either or, we can do. I don't know if you've done this, but if on your screen there should be that little question icon in the corner. So if people ask a question, it'll pop up on there, and you can click it, and then it'll show it to you.
Yeah, I got it pulled up.
Okay. I've been working on my adrenal class, so I'm at like 15 slides done so far.
When's that? February?
Yeah.
Is it gonna be similar to what you're presenting at PVC?
No, I'm doing neurotransmitter presentation there, so it's going to be different.
I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So I literally have two PowerPoints that I'm working on at the same time, and I don't have much spare time to begin with, so it's like,
Yeah.
ugh. But I did wear my shirt.
What's it say? I can't see it. I mean, I can see it, but I can't read backwards.
It says, "I may be wrong, but I doubt it." I want to get a bunch of those made and put like IMH logo on it.
Start giving out at your seminars.
That'd be funny though.
Yeah.
All right, lab work questions. Anything related to lab work? CBC, CMP, thyroid, lipids, hormones, Dutch test, GI map, um, any of that. We can take all of it. I know you guys have them because you DM me with them. So Jay says, "Let's see your best TikTok dance." How high is too high estradiol for a male on PEDs? Is that the whole question? Yeah. Okay. So the real question, the real thing to consider would be, we always talk about androgen to estrogen ratio. So as long as you kind of titrate up in that, stay within that same ratio, then generally you probably won't reach a point where it's too high. You'd probably reach a point where you kind of top out your androgens first. So like once you figure out that I need this much, this much testosterone, this much of like non-aromatizing compound, it's a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1 or whatever it is, you can pretty much just go up and up and up and up until you find your peak. And generally you won't have any problems. And if you do, you can of course just flip the ratio and correct it pretty easy. I don't have a number. There's not like a number. It's not like, yeah, over 200 on your E2 is too high or something, because it's going to vary a lot person to person. But yeah, find that ratio and stick to that.
Yeah, I'm the same way. So the ratio thing, but then like we've seen with like me, mine will be tanked no matter what it's on, versus I have other guys that we can be at like a 150 E2 and they feel just fine. So like I take into account like their biofeedback, how they're feeling, nipple sensitivity, skin, everything else. So
Yeah.
it depends. Some guys are good at 20, 50. I have other guys, the higher the better.
Yeah. And I think most people probably err on the side of the higher the better, as long as they're not having,
Side
I
effects.
mean, the nipple sensitivity becomes the issue
Yeah.
with most people, and that's kind of the limiting factor. Some people, dude, fucking some people can have crazy high estradiol and never have any problems, and other
Yeah.
people, they like whiff a little bit of estrogen and they get flare ups. But
Yeah.
Says A1C is low. Wait, A1C is low with no other metabolic issues? Question mark. You could look at, so low A1C obviously being more of an average of glucose over span of time. So things that I would probably consider would be like low adrenal function, because you got to think A1C is not just the spikes that you're getting from meals. It's not just like that awakening response that you like when you test fasting. So that's like everything while you sleep, in between meals, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour post meal, like all that. So like I probably, when I see, and it depends on how low you mean by low. If it's like 0.1 or 0.2 below range, generally not concerned. But if it's relatively low, first thing I'm going to look at is probably adrenal function. That's because you're not pushing out like enough hepatic glucose throughout the day to kind of maintain that average that you need.
Now, do you take into account what phase they're in? Say they're low carb at the tail end of prep.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you're typically going to see that blood glucose, insulin levels be lower.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you will, right? Like you've seen it. You've seen, you'll see somebody when they're, and you got to think like on a lab test, it's not really geared towards somebody that's super low body fat, right? So you might see somebody come back and their insulin's like a 2 after prep, So for
Usually I
sure.
look at that in adrenals. Like, I've seen guys at the end of a dieting phase, it's been low.
Yep.
And a lot of times it's stress related. Once we start adding in some food and doing some refeeds, usually those insulin levels pick back up, pull back on
Right.
cardio.
Right.
So,
And a lot of that's because again their adrenals are tanked,
Tagged, yeah.
so yeah. Could B12 level be correlated to how well someone is methylating, um, or can Dutch test be, well, yeah, they worded it weird, or only Dutch testing to gauge methylation? Well, what's one of the main methyl donors? B12. So, do we know if you're deficient in B12, does it automatically mean you're not methylating? Not necessarily, but like when we see low methylation on a Dutch test, the main things we add are methyl donors, which generally come in the form of methyl B vitamins a lot of the time. So I would say there's a good chance that you probably undermethylate, but you wouldn't know it for sure
Do a Dutch
unless you
test.
cook, right? So, pretty good, pretty good correlation there, but it's not like an exact like this equals this. But if you do have low serum B12 or B6 or folate, then there's definitely a lot higher chance that you'll undermethylate. But you can, on the actual Dutch test, you have the organic acid section at the bottom too that has the metabolites for B12, B6, etc. So you can see all that on there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that would be, yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely a correlation. 2 point, yeah. So you said point 0.2 below on the
Yeah.
A1C. So it's probably
Nothing to
like,
worry about.
right. So it's probably, mid fours or something like that. So, um, I've had a few people that you'll see with like really hypoadrenal function, low cortisol, and they don't have like, some of them get the crashes in blood sugar and that kind of gives it away. But other times I see their A1C and like, man, like their glucose would be like a 70 something, like low
Yeah.
70s, and their A1C is really low. Thinking, man, that's awfully low. And then I get their cortisol back and it's like a 4 or a 3 or
Yeah.
something like that. I'm like, well, fuck, you're crashed.
That's why.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, let's see here. And if you can scroll
Yeah, that's what I'm
to
trying to do.
it and see the questions. Let's see. All right, this one, MCHC is slightly low. Does this signify lack of iron? Uh, yeah, it can, right? So MCHC, MCV, RDW, those are
Yeah.
all what? Iron, B12, folate, etc. Yep. What's the best approach to get back in range? Like, what are some things that, like, what's your first course of action on iron?
What do you do?
Well, I just like to check dietary iron first. I mean,
Yeah.
you can. The thing is, like, iron deficiency in males is less common, just because we eat so much more,
Yeah.
animal product and protein. Um, and females definitely more common because they just less dietary iron intake. So you can always just like plug it into chronometer your diet,
Yeah.
see what your iron intake is, and base it on that. You can also, you could also check out. You want to look at ferritin too and see like what's your storage versus what's in the blood. You want to look at vitamin C intake because
Yeah.
even increasing your vitamin C intake will help with absorption. So yeah, so I wouldn't just be like, oh, my MCH, is low or whatever, and
Let's take some
automatically,
iron. Yeah.
right, right, exactly. And even when I have people take iron, I'm trying to think. I think the RDA for iron is something like 18 milligrams or something like that. It's not much. And even then, when I have people take it, I start at like 10. I don't just throw in
So do
like
you go straight
30.
for supplement instead of usually I just aim for nutrition first.
Yep.
Try to push that
Yep.
increase vitamin C. I'll go ahead and make sure we've got some B vitamins in there as well. But usually I try to just do it through diet. That way they don't
Yep.
have to spend more money on a supplement.
Yeah, for sure. And generally, again, like in males, super easy.
Yeah.
Females just gets a little bit more difficult. You just have to be a little more choosy with like what kind of vegetables you eat that might have
Yeah.
iron and meats and stuff. But it's definitely doable for sure. And then the next thing would be gut issues. Like
Yeah.
if you have a shitload of gut issues, then your nutrient absorption is
Yeah.
obviously
It's
not
gonna
going to
be
be
poor.
right. So somebody asks, wait, we got to wait a minute.
Jace asked one, but it's not letting me scroll at all
Oh, okay.
for whatever reason. I think his was what do we look at for adrenal issues?
Oh, okay.
So me, I'm gonna look at obviously like say like Dutch testing isn't happening. I'm gonna look at cortisol, AM fasted. I'm gonna look at reverse T3, TSH, typically insulin levels as well. That's usually where I'm gonna start off first. Try to avoid a Dutch test if at all possible.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can you can see obviously with AM cortisol, like are they getting an awakening response or
Yeah,
not? I would say generally with AM cortisol, I like anywhere from
12 to 15.
yeah, and I go by how they feel. Like if
Yeah,
they're a 10 and they feel pretty good, I'm not too worried about
yeah,
it. If they're like a 7 or an 8 and they feel shitty, then we know
yeah,
it's too low. Um, and then on the flip side of that, if they're like an 18 to 20 plus, then we obviously know what's going
it's
on
high.
there.
Yeah,
Right. So that would be those would kind of be like the easiest blood markers for sure. And then obviously, like I said, blood glucose. Like,
yeah.
I mean,
We're
if you're
seeing random
seeing,
crashes, or even
yep,
if it's high in the morning. I mean,
yep,
obviously we may have like dawn phenomenon or um, just randomly waking up high. I'll also look at like resting heart rate um,
yep,
upon waking a few times a week, but I'm usually gonna look at that after a harder training session. So maybe a back day or a leg day, specifically with males. If we start seeing that elevated the next day, then we know we've pushed a little bit hard that day.
yep, yep. Yeah. So I mean, any of those markers work if you're not resorting to Dutch tests. And obviously, if you are doing Dutch tests, then you have a lot of resources there with
Yeah,
cortisol free metabolites, clearance, all that stuff.
yeah,
So that's like a whole different discussion because there's a lot on there
yeah.
to look at. This other one was lowering hematocrit count while on testosterone other than dumping blood.
Telmisartan,
Yep.
IP6,
Yep.
spots in fruit flows sometimes.
Yep.
Um, getting rid of vitamin C if all
Yep.
possible. I've had some guys, even with like telmisartan, say we get to like 80 mgs, they'll still have an issue. I'll just lower like their diet in general to try to prevent it. Maybe only once or twice a week we may do red meat. A lot of them are usually hammering organ meat at the same time, so we usually pulling back on that as well.
Yep.
Maybe limit
Yep.
spinach.
Yep.
Some guys, if they're hammering is it Uncle Ben's cream of rice?
Oh yeah, you get like the fortified cream of
Yeah.
rice that has
I
all the
mean,
iron.
small things like that, but usually if they can get a hold of telmisartan, then we'll go that way. Otherwise, we're going to do IP6 with Swanson Fruit Flow.
Yep. So for those that you don't know, IP6 will pull out excess iron,
Chelation.
and IP6 is really cool because it's not going to go into like your bone or brain tissue and stuff like that and leach out minerals. So that's a pretty cool feature of it. Very good safety profile. But what Trey's alluding to is a lowering iron intake because a lot of times these people have they have too high of iron intake.
Yeah.
And telmisartan works really well by itself.
Yeah.
And we've seen that. I've seen that in labs. with, of course, all the other benefits that it has. But I would also just say too that based on just some of the research that I've done and also a couple of the podcasts, the high like blood viscosity because of androgen use doesn't really seem like an independent risk factor for cardiovascular. So like one really good podcast we did was that risk prevention one with Scott Howell that was like a year or two ago. And he talked about that specifically because he deals with that in his medical practice all the time. And he talked about essentially how, this natural increase that we get in hematocrit, hemoglobin from testosterone is not a risk factor. So I would check that out.
Now,
OPD
question for
podcast.
you, like, to me in my head, wouldn't blood doping, do you sometimes see people that still it keeps them high, like because they're regenerating even more? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah,
I don't know if there's any
that's
science to that. That's just like what I've
yep.
seen correlation with some guys. So I try to
So
prevent that if all possible.
two people have said that to me, and I've seen it myself. One was Dr. Serrano, and the other was Scott Howe. And and Scott said it on the podcast, but Doc had told me that forever ago, and I started looking at it, and I was noticing that people would just come back higher and higher and higher before they blood dumped because I was able to get repeat labs, and so I avoid dumping with
I don't have anyone do it.
ever. No, I can't even tell you the last time I told someone to do it.
Yeah, I personally never have. I've told them not to do it, and we've seen some improvement there.
Yeah, you do. It works at first, like it works initially, and then you start getting essentially, unless you're getting like a prescribed phlebotomy where they're going more frequently. But
I can see maybe that beneficial. Like, say you got someone who just sludge, then maybe just that to get them started. Then we start doing everything on the back end to prevent it, or at least lower it over time.
Because generally, when you go in to give blood, they're going to test you anyhow, and if you're too high, they won't let you donate, or they won't let you. You'll have to go get a actual like therapeutic phlebotomy done. So no, I totally agree. Someone asked, do you think Dutch test is really important before starting prep? And this looks like a female question. Well, I mean,
if it's a female, I would say yes.
Yeah.
Male, less likely unless they're nutcase.
Yeah, I mean, it really just depends on their history. If it's like, I'll give you an example. If it's a client that I've maybe worked with for a while and everything's good and we've done blood work, we've done all this stuff, then I'm not
less likely.
Like $400 for a Dutch test before prep's probably not necessary if we don't have any problems.
Like I could see if it's female, like they compete every year, did multiple shows the year before, a couple years before, I might go ahead and just do that.
Right.
Just be on the safe side. But honestly, I feel like a lot of that we can get through biofeedback and just comprehensive blood work.
Yeah.
Beforehand.
Yeah.
And even you and I both, we don't just take people on as a prep or a fat loss phase right away, unless maybe like they're morbidly obese. We're usually going to do some sort of primer phase or prep before we prep phase.
Yep. Yeah, no, you're right. So I should know by the time that we start prep that we don't really need any of that. If I've done a Dutch test, it'll have been way, before that. So yeah. If it's a brand new client or something, then sure, I might do it. Right.
Yeah.
This is a really interesting one. Okay. My resting heart rate, I have some good feedback on this, I think. We'll see what she says. My resting heart rate has been elevated since I started working on getting my cycle back months ago compared to my super low heart rate before. It worried me. Sorry, I'm scrolling through this. It worried me, but I thought maybe it's actually my system coming up. And you are exactly right, because what's happening is you saw too low of a resting heart rate because your body was crashed, essentially. So that would be the same with glucose. Like if somebody, for example, had maybe a low 70s or something on the glucose, and then they came up to an 80 or an 85 or something as their system, come back up. All that really tells me is that cortisol is coming back to a more normal level, right? So 100% fine. Yeah, not a worries. It would be contextual. Like, yeah, if I see someone, their heart rate's like fucking 40, resting, it's like they're really crashed. And then it comes up to a 60. And it's like, awesome. That's great. So there is a such thing as being, I mean, essentially, if you think about when you get this like phases of adrenal fatigue, if you want to use that word.
Insufficiency, et cetera.
Right. When you get to that insufficiency point, your heart rate's going to be crashed. Glucose will be irregular. Blood pressure could be irregular. All these things. You don't retain waters. You piss all the time. So, I'd say that's a good sign. Someone asks, any issues with Telma and dehydrating? Not that I've seen, just drink enough water,
I mean, we tell guys, at least I do, like, say we're doing a photo shoot or a prep, have them titrate up, tell them starting as we go.
Right.
Maybe peak week go 20, 40. I've seen some go to 80, 100.
Yeah, temporarily.
Just temporarily that last 1 to 2 weeks.
Right, and it's all based on like water. If you're just on a steady dose, a maintenance dose that you use all the time, and you drink fluid, what does your urine look like? Is it like fucking brown looking? Then you're hydrated. But if your pee is light colored most of the time, you're hydrated. I think he's asking because the telmisartan will it does interact with the RAS cycle, which lowers aldosterone, and so you're gonna you'll hold less fluid. But that's the point, right? That's why it helps lower blood pressure. Less stress on your kidneys because of the fluid. So no, it shouldn't dehydrate you. Just drink enough. Kind of the same. Oops, what the hell did I do? Kind of the same thing like they give as a complement to some blood pressure medications. They'll give a diuretic to some people. Right? Says, yeah, that's my case. I'm doing my Dutch test next week. So I'm guessing maybe they're new or something, or they want to see. Yeah, that's awesome, man. There's nothing wrong with that. Oh, wow. Yeah. Oura Ring had me high 30s sleeping, mid to high 40s sleeping. Oh, and before, and now mid to high 40s. And from 50s to 60s during the day up to 60s to 70s during the day. So that's super reassuring. Thank you. Yeah, you're going in the right direction then. Sweet. And then other guys, my thoughts too. Thank you. That was on the telmisartan. So what's this one? Oh, here's a good question. What's the most common issue you see with females? Competitor. They put competitor in quotations. I'm not sure if they're probably asking like, health issue or whatever. Most common? I mean, the most common.
To me, estrogen dominance.
Yeah, I would say either that or crash progesterone. I mean, because fucking everybody's progesterone's like 0.1, 0.2. Like nobody, dude, I can't tell you. I would be willing to bet that in the last 20 female clients that I've started with, and keep in mind, I get a lot of these on purpose because that's why they're coming. I bet you maybe 2 of them had a progesterone that was over 0.05. No shit. Yeah. So yeah, I would agree with you. I would say probably like estrogen dominance, and then probably low progesterone steal because of cortisol, and then just insert any gut issue that you can possibly imagine into that. But they say, what's the most common issue? What is actually the most common issue? Stress.
Yeah,
that's the real most common issue, right? I mean, it's the driver for everything. I mean, you and I have talked about it so much. Like we like we go over these protocols over and over and fine tune and tweak and fix and all these little things, but it always just kind of boils back to like this
Stress,
underlying
what we're taking care of.
problem, right? And it's always, and it's not like an acute thing. It's always like accumulation of stress over
Yeah.
months and years and, all that. So yeah, you could, I mean, I get some of the complex cases where they have a lot of, maybe they have like three, four, five, six issues. And half the time I don't start with the protocol for like each issue, you
Yeah,
know?
like that one of the guys that we talked about his gut issue, we didn't start straight like addressing the gut. He was like cyclist, is pulling back on stress. Like I think we've been together maybe 6 months, and it's just been training reps in reserve, just focusing on stress more than anything. Then we started his gut protocol, and we're going on from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I mean, in reality, you'll get some relief from the protocols. Like they're going to
Yeah,
help, but once you stop, you're kind of, you
yeah.
know, you're back to kind of in square one again. So, but yeah, that's the one. Psychological deficiencies. That is the, I know, easier said than done. All right. I'm gonna scroll. Let's see where we're at. So estrogen dominance is something hard to fix. Um, well, I mean, you say hard to fix. I mean, potentially, but again, what you would want to ask, well, why does a female, she's talking about females, I assume,
Yeah,
why would a female have estrogen dominance? And the main thing is going to be a gut issue because of
yeah.
that recirculating. So the question would be like, well, how hard is the gut issue to fix? So nine
Like
times
we
out of
can do
10,
things to like band-aid the issue, but like at the end of the
right?
day, like say it's SIBO, like if you got beta glucuronidase to the roof, they've still got SIBO. We can still do the calcium to glucarate, add some chasteberry if they need it for
Yep.
progesterone. But if we're not fixing the SIBO and the stress to go along with it, and then like the gap junctions, the gut lining, and everything else, it's never going to be fixed.
Right. Yeah.
It's
You
just
can
going to be a
band-aid
never-ending
it.
cycle.
Right. You can support the liver detox.
Yeah,
But is it hard to fix? I would say I would say that it really just depends on, again, like how compliant is the person and
yeah,
how, when I say compliant, not like how well, there's tons of people that follow plans really well and
yeah,
they still don't get fixed. And a lot of it's because they don't really buy into the plan. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Mentally, they just aren't, they question shit all the time. They're always like, you know, they're seeking too much outside information. They're
yeah.
always, their mind's fucking running in all these other directions. So yeah,
But I think
if
it
you
also depends on like the protocol. Like I've written protocols for some people, and like they're just stressed out spending the money, and we
sure,
can't fix them at all. Like no matter what it is. So like I think it just depends on like any type of stress that's causing it. Like that's the biggest issue is just based on the client. Like I don't think there's any it's like, hey, like it's impossible to fix. I think at the end of the
right,
day, like it's impossible if the client isn't addressing their things on their end.
yep, yeah, I agree. It's kind of most people come to a coach for a protocol, but really the habits are the hardest stuff to
Yeah.
change. That's the hardest thing to fix, really. So
Yeah.
here's a little bit different question. So how long do you recommend coming down to PED baseline, aka TRT, when blood markers are off? I mean,
I
well,
mean, I can use me as an example. Like
go ahead. Sure.
we slightly increased things for like the wedding, and right away I was just like, no, like things aren't where we want it, and that's going on almost 2 years. We've been at like a baseline, and things are still being corrected. I think it depends on like I've talked to a few national level guys that have just pushed it, and they're going to do one final prep. To me, if it depends on how long they've been pushing it. It's like with me, I pushed it for like 5 years, so I feel like we need really more time to allow you to get the baseline. But then it also depends on like we can't do like 8 weeks to fix your blood. Say it took 8 weeks to fix it and get back to normal. Now we gotta allow it some time to actually hold there. And I think it
Right.
just depends on like what is. Some it can be another 8 to 12 weeks. Others, like myself, like we're still digging through stuff that's still not fixed, and we're not even close to being fixed.
And you make a good point. Like, look, like let's take the whole span. How much have you been bad versus how much have you been good?
Yeah.
Kind of over this course of time. Like if you've been blasting crews for 8 years or whatever, and you've taken pretty good adequate time off, and you've doing all the things right, then it's probably going to be a lot quicker,
Yeah.
you know, and you're probably not going to need those super, super long, like 12-month periods or whatever to fix shit.
Yeah.
So it just depends.
But I think like also like they forget there's so many other like pathways we can hit during that downtime. Like we're so focused on like androgens, for example. We can mess with things like insulin, peptides, GH, etc. At the same time, and honestly, you and I both know most of the people, a lot of them maybe aren't training optimally, maybe aren't hitting all those markers daily that they need to, and they're focusing on the PED side of things. So I feel like if you focus on that, you can kind of show them, buy them in, like, hey, we can stay on this cruise dose or TRT, spend more time off versus on.
Right.
Usually it makes it a lot easier.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and a lot of the time too, when you are on TRT or whatever it might be, that's a good time to clean up insulin sensitivity and do all these other things. So by the time by the time you are ready to grow again, everything's set up. And even then you can start growing without adding more androgens back in. I mean, you're insulin sensitive, you're probably a little depleted. You can increase other pathways, like you said, growth hormone, IGF pathways, stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of considerations there. And just think about like, what does the androgens help you with? When do you really need them, type thing. So yeah, let's see. Doc did not even put progesterone on my labs when I asked for panels after I got off hormonal birth control. LOL. I'm beyond done with these people. Yeah, I don't. To be completely honest, I don't think. I'm trying to think, because almost most of my clients order their own labs anymore.
Yeah.
So like when I see labs from doctors, the typical things that missing are like free thyroid hormones, or even just T3, T4 in general, reverse T3 that never check, progesterone sometimes, and even then, like sometimes they don't even have them check like luteal phase or anything if they're having a cycle. They'll just give them the labs. So yeah, I don't know. That's a different discussion, I think.
Yeah.
So, LOL, Austin, I thought he was your brother. No. Nope. But you and my brother might be about the same age, though. How old are you?
I just turned 27.
Oh, you're 1 year older than my brother.
Yeah, he's like 26 or so.
Yeah. Yep. But no, my brother doesn't look like me.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't know. My brother looks like my mom. You wouldn't know it's my brother. Says thank you. Yes, you're welcome. I don't know if this is a question or a comment. It says started taking Jumpstart and now TSH is going up. I don't know if that's a question or a comment, but I would like, what was your TSH before? I mean, if you had a pretty crashed, think about what Jumpstart's doing, this hypothalamus pituitary axis. So think about what other things are signaled in that axis: thyroid, adrenals, ovaries, testes. I'm assuming no testes here. I'm guessing it looks like more of an ovary question, but yeah. So yeah, you could definitely have you could definitely have all of those things kind of go up temporarily.
Yeah.
Oh, they're still in the questions in. All right, all right. Let's see. That's a good question. What would you do if someone had high hematocrit and also anemia at the same time? When they say anemia, are you talking iron,
Iron.
or are you talking pernicious anemia, which would be like B12, right?
That's what
Because
I would do. I mean, well, is there other markers off like RDW and everything else? Like,
right, yeah,
honestly, I'd probably go methylated B vitamins, throw some lithium
yeah,
in there, and then address everything else in the meantime. But also,
yeah,
like, were they dehydrated going in there as well? Like, I
yeah,
think there's just a lot of different factors that go into it. But like, I think anymore, I usually throw B vitamins with lithium almost always, whether it's through Morpho Multi or maybe life extensions 2 a day, and throw in some additional lithium. And
yeah,
then the other things we address, like maybe I would keep in the vitamin C, but I'd probably address things like maybe the IP6 or the telmisartan if we're gonna go
yeah.
that route.
Right. And you could have like what is causing the anemia, because you could have a low B vitamin and a high iron, or vice
Yeah,
versa at the same time, type thing, you know.
yeah,
So the probably the most common case I would see would be kind of what happens is the body will kind of hoard iron from inflammation. We'll see ferritin especially goes pretty high.
through the
And then
roof. Yeah,
women, like in women, we see commonly, we see, like you said, we see these RDWs and things that are off. So they might have like high iron because of inflammation, but low B vitamins at the same time. So it's kind of
yeah,
like we want to address the high iron and then also support the B vitamin. So it's probably something similar to that in most cases.
yeah.
Okay, we'll do. Yeah, we'll take a few more. Let's see what we got here. Um, good. What's a good range for progesterone or progesterone? Um, the good. I mean, really, a good range is kind of just wherever you have a cycle and
Yeah.
where you're ovulating. Really, it could be. I mean, I've seen people having cycles and ovulating. When I say ovulating, like they could check like their basal body temperature and see if it's increasing, and then obviously they'll know if they're having a cycle. Uh, it could be, shoot, a few points. Like, I mean, I've had people having cycles on below a one,
Yeah.
less than one, having cycles. Now that's not common, but I've also had people that were like a 15, so it's really going to be how much you need to basically have a cycle and get that rise in body temp. But just know that if you are having a cycle and you're at a one, you're probably only like one bad stressful week away from not having a cycle, because
Yeah.
you don't have that much. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So yeah, you definitely. It's tough though, because a lot of people can't seem to get their progesterone you know up above a few points
Hmm.
with just like stress reduction and chasteberry and that. And so it's tough. And is that um, something that's caused by like really long-term issues, that they long-term stress over this time, and adaptation, potentially age. Here, if you're like in your 30s and you started beating the shit out of yourself in your early 20s, and you're like trying to get your cycle back 10 years later, it's like, that it gets tough, and you're only going to get so much response. So, or even older, 40s. Like
Yeah.
sometimes sometimes when you get to the point where they're in their 40s and stuff, I'm like, look, you, there's probably a pretty, your percentage of chance of getting your cycle back is like really low
Yeah.
now. So we're going to early menopause. Oh, why might B12 be super high? Mine's always off the chart despite never supplementing. Just diet.
Diet.
Yeah. 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 I think most people have pretty high B12 from what I've seen on labs. I think the issue, and you mentioned it, was probably lack of lithium for B12 transport. Um, but yeah, I mean, fuck anyone that eats like any amount of animal proteins probably is going to have pretty good
Higher
amount of.
levels. Yeah.
So the reasons we would see low is like if they lack that intrinsic factor in their gut, so they need methylated Bs, right? But yeah, I would say that's relatively common. And B12 being water soluble, it's pretty low risk of anything. What could be causing iron deficiency? Well, we already covered that one. Yeah, go back. We'll repost the video. Go back towards the beginning. We talked about that for about 5 minutes. So recheck that one. Let's say, oh, sweet, that's me. 30 now. Oh, I'm probably talking about the cycle. Not necessarily. I mean, not necessarily. That's not necessarily always the case. It's everyone's so different in terms of how resilient they are. You know, some people
I
can.
mean, I've seen some. Um, one of the girls I trained at G-Force, like she got hers back in her 40s. And
Yeah.
she was a type 2 diabetic, over like morbidly obese, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden got it back out of this. Like now, I think she might be 45 now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it happens. It's just
Yeah.
everybody's going to be different, and it's genetics. It's also like accumulation. Like how much have you put on yourself? If you're a Gen Pop person and you are kind of stressed out, you just have bad habits and things, your chances of getting it back are pretty good when you just fix shit, you know.
It's more
But
so like competitors.
right, because what will start to happen is we start getting like this hypothalamic amenorrhea where you're not even getting signaling from the top of the chain down, and that's where you can't do much to fix that when it's completely shut off. You know, that's where like HRT and stuff comes in, because you can take 9 million milligrams of chasteberry, but chasteberry is supposed to signal luteinizing hormone. If you're not getting a signal, then
Yeah.
it's not gonna matter. So um, if this is kind of we'll see if we can answer this one maybe. If body fat's around 20%, the goal is to gain as much muscle as possible. Would you recommend period of mini cut before pushing food up? No set date for shows. This is a female. Oh, this is a
Depends on
male.
what they're
This is a
doing
male.
before.
Male. This is a male.
Yeah. Depends on what they're doing before. I mean, like, and just depends on like blood work. Like, say, like blood glucose is through the roof, insulin levels are through the roof. Most likely we need to pull back. But the same token, if they've been trying to diet for years, I mean, you know how it is. Some gym pop men have been eating 1,200 calorie diets. We
Yeah.
maybe need to spend some time pushing food up. Or let's say someone came to us and they have low test levels. I mean, a lot of times we can feed up a little bit and recomp while they say they have started their HRT or TRT. I think it just depends. Now, if someone's like just gym pop, blood markers are okay. I mean, I guess it just depends on where their food was at and nutrition was at. I'm more likely going to do like a primer phase
Yeah.
and leave it there for about 4 to 12 weeks. And a lot of times, those same people aren't doing all the habits, aren't doing any steps or cardio. They're sitting on their ass all the time. They're not eating the proper meals. They're not even training progressively or training at all with the proper intensity. So I think it just almost always I'm going to have them go 4 to 8 weeks, just
Yeah.
holding there, and then just make the adjustments based on biofeedback and what we're seeing.
And they said gain as much muscle as possible. It's like even if they're still a little bit, have a decent insulin sensitivity at 20% body fat, like your room to get fatter is not much,
Yeah.
So you got to think if you want to gain as much as possible, then you need a starting point that allows you to gain as much as possible.
Yeah.
So I think you might just, like you said, you're probably going to be best to clean up prime things. Otherwise, you're just going to run out of, you're going to be next, 6 weeks in, you're just going to be fat.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not going to carry you very long. Mine seems to be on the line because I have levels, but not the cycle yet. Fingers crossed. Keep working. Check basal body temperature is another one that you can check to see if you are actually getting that rise in temp during the month. Apps, go to the app store on your phone. There's a bunch of like um, basal body temp apps and things. You
Yeah.
can track it. It'll track it for you. So that's a pretty good way to kind of know if you're actually getting that bump in progesterone. Thanks. You guys are really awesome. You are quite welcome. I was trying to do green screen back here. I did it on another call, and I don't remember how to do it now.
Yeah.
I don't
don't know how
remember.
any of this works at all.
If you just scroll through, it'll give you the sweet. What's this one? I don't know how all of it works. So I'll have. I don't know what that is.
I know for
I'll
like our
have,
mentor calls, you'll sometimes have them.
dude. I'll get on. I'll have consult calls with people I've never talked to before, and we'll get on, and I'll be on like the fisheye filter. They're just like, oh, yeah, this is normal. So I just got a thermometer to do that. There you go. Sweet. Yeah, I do that. I do it often. I kind of like that one, but I think this is probably, I really like the lightning bolt one.
Yeah.
Check it out. Sweet. Whoa. Just repeat over and oh, look at the ripple. Did you see the ripple?
Yeah.
We'll take one more question if anyone has one. And then brains about toast for the day. As I'm sure yours is probably toast. When did you start this morning?
8 o'clock. But I was up at 7 already doing stuff.
Yeah.
Bed super late, but still work on that bedtime thing.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So Jerica's snowboarding this week
Yeah,
with
I
her
saw.
with her their stepdad's with her because her stepdad they shut down in December at the
Yeah.
asphalt plant because he's
Yeah.
the plant manager. And so anyhow, long story short, they went to Holiday Valley, the place in
Yeah.
New York, whatever. So it's just me and the dogs and the cats.
Did her brother and sister go or no?
Yeah, they went for a few days, but now it's just her and her stepdad for the rest of the
I
week.
gotcha.
So, but yeah, I'm just holding down the fort.
Yeah.
But yeah, my point being is that last night I just crashed out. I was like, all right, well, it's like 9:45 and I'm done, so I guess I'm just
Yeah.
gonna go to bed.
Yeah.
Cool guys. Well, I don't see any
I
more
did have
questions.
one more. I forgot to bring
Okay.
it up. I had a guy message me. He wanted to know what we usually look for blood work, like what we like to test for, and then how
Just in
often.
general.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, me and you do the standard like CBC. I mean, the easy go to is a comprehensive weight loss panel, but CBC, CMP, liver, thyroid. Try to get reverse T3 in there. Insulin levels, CRP. Um, After me and you talked, I've been having people do D dimer levels, especially right
Yep.
now with the other stuff going on. And
Yep.
then been throwing in GGT as well
Yep.
recently. What else? A1C. In terms of how often, I mean, I guess it depends. Like Me, I go every 6 to 8 weeks, give or take. But I have
Kind of
some
depends on
guys,
the
yeah,
context, right? I mean,
yeah, some guys maybe go at least twice a year. I mean, but I have
right.
one guy. He's an older guy. He goes once a year, and that's because his place is 4 or 5 hours away. To
Gotcha.
get one to pay out of pocket, when he goes to the doctor, they won't test anything. Um, I have some guys that'll do it every 4 weeks because they're anal about it and want to do it. So I think it just depends um, on what it is. Maybe if they're a competitor and we've done a growth phase, we'll usually do it midway through before we start and then at the end. And then if we're maybe going to have some downtime, they want to prep or fat loss phase, like a photo shoot, we may do it again just to see where we're at. So I think it just depends.
Yeah, no, I think those are all good recommendations. I mean, if you have somebody that's not doing anything super crazy and their blood work generally looks good, then they don't need to do it every month. It's like
Once
they
twice a
could,
year is more than enough.
yeah, a couple times a year, maybe like if they do happen to do any type of blasting, like maybe once while they're on, once while they're off type of
Yeah.
thing, just kind of
And I think
see
it
the
also
difference.
depends on like the markers that are off too. Like if I know
Yeah,
someone that's constantly lipids are off or CBC's off, or like with me, like when my insulin levels were through the roof, I would probably check that a little bit more.
we needed to fix it,
Yeah,
and
a
right,
little bit more often. We may not go a full panel every time. Like if someone's liver and lipids are off, we can pull up a quick panel for 50 to
right,
$80.
right.
Um, and go from there. If you have someone that's got a bum thyroid, then we can do an intensive thyroid panel and just forget the rest if they're fine. I'm thinking it just depends on if there's an issue, whether they're blasting, cruising, competing, or just standard like Gen Pop fat loss client.
And I would also say it depends on what is the issue, how long does it take to fix? Like,
Yeah,
if I know it's going to take 3 or 4 months to fix it, I'm not going to do blood work every 4 weeks
every
because it's
month.
a
Yeah,
waste of money. We're not going to see anything. So, yeah, I agree for sure.
it'd be the same thing with
Um,
like a GI map or a Dutch test. We're not going to do
yeah,
that. Some guys including that and thinking they're going to do it all the time, and you and I both know like you're not going to be doing that often.
right. No, I agree. Last question. Well, not really a question, but they said, tell us more about your adrenal class, which I can. Um, okay, so the adrenal class, I'm going to cover essentially all adrenal hormones. So cortisol, and androgens, androgens from the adrenal glands, progesterone, pathways like pregnenolone pathway, branching out, talk about cortisol patterns, cortisol metabolism, like cortisone versus cortisol, like enzyme reactivation, deactivation, talk about um, adrenal versus what I was working on today was like adrenal versus ovarian
Yeah.
hyperandrogenism, like PCOS versus adrenal hyperandrogenism. Why might that happen? What can you do about it? Like 5-alpha reductase conversion. Uh, there's a bunch. It's going to
Are you
be
going to do case studies too?
Yeah, so I'm kind of just doing, I'm like putting images and examples and stuff
Yeah,
on all of them. You know what I
I
mean?
got you. Yeah,
So you, there'll be actual examples along the way. But I think of what else. Oh, I have aldosterone and like RAS cycle, like actual showing how diuresis,
yeah, that's what I was
all
going to
that.
ask. You doing that?
Yeah, like RAS, the whole slide, like on RAS cycle and how and even how like hypo versus hyperadrenal function will impact that and all that jazz. So I mean, there's going to be a whole lot of stuff in here, and I think what it will help people do mainly is I think it will help people identify issues a lot more efficiently with
Yeah,
their clients, like actually knowing what the heck they're looking at when they're if you took the Dutch test class, that's kind of mainly it was like figuring out what am I looking at, like how
yeah,
do I
address
identify
it.
it? So
It's
yeah,
not a
it should be
protocol
sweet.
class.
No, I mean I do
You
some
do some.
protocol stuff, Like
You
I'll
know
do
what I mean?
some, yeah, but it's not. But you can't really. It's difficult to make a class that's like if it's this, do this. If it's
Always
this,
do
do
this.
this,
Yeah. Yeah.
because there's too much contextual stuff. So
Yeah.
I want people to realize like how to actually identify stuff so they know is that even the right protocol?
Yeah.
Because you know you might. What I don't want people to do is I don't want people to think like, oh, cortisol, we got to take Morphicom. Like, what if you have low cortisol? Like I want to think like because
Or
people
if like their
butcher,
estradiol's tanked out, like
dude.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, people butcher that shit. Like
some
I,
will like throw in adaptogen, like or like adrenal health, and they don't even need it. It's not even like
right,
an actual, maybe just a simple cortisol thing where we just need to throw in some KSM,
yeah,
not the whole adrenal itself.
right. And I see that a lot. I see people they're tanked out and they're throwing in a bunch of shit that lowers cortisol. I'm like, no, don't fucking do that.
Yeah.
So we want to try to avoid and that. And my whole thing's simplicity with protocol, like to make things as simple as we can. So
Yeah.
okay, I think let's see. Yeah, man, I think that's about it
Yeah.
for the night. I will repost this up so anyone can view it, and then I'll tag you in it so you can share it if you want.
Yeah. No
But
problem, buddy.
thanks for coming on. I got to
No
go get
problem,
my
man.
blue light blockers on.
I had to throw mine on. I got daylight
Yeah,
ones. I'm always on this freaking computer.
yep, yep. I got them too, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna go put mine on. But y'all have a good evening.
All right, buddy. I'll see you.
See ya.